So my plan for tonight was to pick up using Victor's fabulous committee reports that he put out and pick up where he had our next steps leading. So at the end of the January 23rd meeting, he had laid out the next article for our review is Article 10, the Office of the Inspector General. And Emily, Kathy, I don't know if either of you have strong opinions about the Inspector General article, but my general philosophy is don't touch it because that is messy and we don't want to be like the recent Baltimore County issues. So I'm not going to do a Vic and read it line by line, but that's also partially because this is a much more recent article. So the way it is drafted is much cleaner, much easier to read. But are there any thoughts? Have you all had a chance to look over it in advance? Are there any things that you have questions about or that you would like to put on the table to be discussed about Article 10, Office of the Inspector General?
None from me. I'm pretty much of the same opinion. I remember vaguely when it was passed, and like you said, it was the most recent one. So it's really supposed to be a hands-off type of thing. And so I'm keeping my hands off of that, but I'm always open to listen to others' opinion.
Mm-hmm. And Matt, I know you just hopped on. We are looking at Article 10, the Office of the Inspector General. And I just was asking Emily and Kathy if they have any thoughts, concerns, desires to look deeper at any sections, proposals, if anyone's crazy enough. I shouldn't say it that way. You can have a proposal and not be crazy. You could have a very valid reason for it. Emily, Matt, anyone? Thank you, Kathy.
This time for me. Thanks.
Just a general question. I don't know, but what kind of things have we seen the Inspector General actually investigate? Anything recently?
I know I've seen her in the news for a lot of things. Hillary, you can probably remember specifics better.
Every investigation she does is on the website, so I'll put that in the chat. I mean, some of them get a lot of like top billing and some are, more on the boring side. I'll put it in the chat. I mean, she's had, I imagine her highest profile thing you would have seen was former State's Attorney Marilyn Mosby and whether or not, she properly took out of town travel.
Right.
That was basically kind of the sort of probably the most high profile, but she's done a ton of different, investigations over the years. She does an annual report. And then there's also, I'm putting the link into the chat now. She does a public synopsis of every investigation after it's over. And, so stuck that in the chat.
Thank you.
And it's like, some of them, overtime and security camera issues at DPW or, office space. I mean, some of the recent ones are kind of more, boring for lack of a better word. But since she took office, there's always a public synopsis. And then every agency responds, if they were the agency involved, they give a response. So they say, some version, honestly, of thank you so much for investigating this for us. Here's what we plan on doing in response.
Mm-hmm.
Does that help?
Very much. Thank you.
Yeah, okay.
Wasn't there a recent one, Hillary, about a department that was supposed to request reimbursements from the feds and how slowly that was requested?
Yeah, I think so. And I'm just scanning. They had one in August about HCD. So that could certainly have had, some sort of waste there. And then they had one back last April for a health department wasted resources. So, they've had other, payroll issues, that kind of like, more of the money side. So just depends.
Well, and that brings me to a question that I hadn't really thought of. What if the agency that they are looking at doesn't accept their recommendations or doesn't make a plan for going forward? How do they resolve those sorts of what's the word I'm going for? Those situations where they can't come to an agreement of how the agency or the department needs to move forward.
Right. Well, that's the thing. I mean, the inspector general just does the investigation. Often she's going to have the resources and the people and sort of the independence to do it, sort of from outside looking in, and then she just makes a recommendation, and then the agency follows it or doesn't. Kind of goes from there.
Okay.
Matt has his hand up.
Matt.
I mean, I guess to add a little additional context to what Hillary said, it in some ways, depending on what the investigation is about, it's very similar to some of the audits that are mandated for different city departments. There's nothing to necessarily compel an agency to correct a repeated audit finding, but it's often in their interest to do so. And a lot of the investigations, may, well, I want to say a lot of, but many of the investigations may be about specific actions that are taken by specific personnel, as opposed to like kind of more systemic failures or more systemic issues in agencies. That makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense.
May I ask a quick question?
Of course.
So I guess Hillary, okay, so there are findings by the IG and her team, and let's pretend that it's something that has to do with an agency and overtime. Is where would we put something like that if you want the agency? Does the agency have to give an official written response? And then a plan, like Matt said, there's no requirement for writing a plan forward, but do they have to give an official written response where it's documented?
Yeah, they pretty much all do. I mean, have to is kind of, when you get into have to, it's kind of like, how do you compel people to do it? And it's like, this is sort of the dirty secret. It's like, you can't sue yourself. So if like an agency and the mayor said, forget you, I'm not writing an answer to you, and it's really the court of public opinion, and you're going to the polls, that kind of puts the official hammer down. It's not like the IG can sue the mayor's office in court and force them to do something, because that would be suing yourself, right? It's not like Joe Biden doesn't sue the Congress when he doesn't like what they do, or vice versa. I mean, they're all the United States of America. So you can't really go in that forum. The strings to pull are really mostly political, but as Matt said, I mean, nobody wants the bad press or the ire of the elected officials if they're just saying, forget it. We like to, have overtime problems. I mean, it just doesn't happen that way. If it's criminal conduct also, it will get referred to a criminal entity, and then that's different. I mean, a lot of times, like overtime, they'll say, here's the issue. But if the overtime problem is not like, oops, it's a computer glitch and everyone was credited with, 10 hours of overtime they never had, that's more of a like, what are you doing to fix your computer problem? If it's literally, Hillary stole overtime and kept writing down that she worked every night for 4 hours and she never did, then the public synopsis won't reveal my name, because that would be like personnel information. It'll say, we identified a member of the law department and they were scamming and overtime, and they've basically been, essentially we recommend those ones. Unfortunately, it's pretty straightforward. You dock the pay and get the money back. And so some of these sadly are repeat type of problems, and there's kind of a way forward. And others are more like, we randomly found out just this one time that X happened. And then, you might get more of a detail in the agency response. Is that helping at all?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, it is.
Yeah.
That's it. So I would, from what you're saying, it's not something that you would put in a charter to say this must be there must be a written response. That would be something that the administration would have to deal with, or even city council
Well,
would have to submit
Yeah,
something.
sorry to yeah, no, even if you put it in there, the question is, what's your enforcement? Like, even if you want to put that in there, which you could do, there's nothing wrong with saying, after every investigation, there will be an agency response. The question is, like, what do you do if there isn't one? And so it's sort of like, do you really want to
Right. No.
do you really
Okay.
want to do it? I mean, there's nothing stopping you from doing it. But it's kind of like, is that enough for you to want to sort of recommend an amendment?
Gotcha. Okay.
Anything else that anyone wants to bring up on the Office of Inspector General? And in future committee meetings, we will have time if you do decide there's something about this article that you do want to make a proposal, you can feel free to bring it up at a later point. But hearing nothing further on Article 10, let's flip over to Article 11, our article, I'll affectionately call it, for the Charter Review Commission. And this one is also very, very short and in a cleaner format than a lot of the older articles. So I am not going to read this one line by line either, other than to point out it goes from establishing the commission to the term, the composition, our duties, our report, and then we dissolve upon completion of our work. I have a couple thoughts here, but I'll save mine and open the floor up to whether anyone else on the committee has any comments, questions, proposals regarding this article.
If I'm reading it correctly, it doesn't say when we have to begin work. It just says when we must deliver our report by, right?
Right. And I think we have to begin no later than May 1st,
Okay, no later than May 1st.
which that
Well,
would be rather rude to give people 1 month.
yeah.
Start them on May 1st and make them end on May 31st.
That's a full-time commission that works every day, including weekends, 24 hours. Okay. I'm wondering why May 1st of every year is used, because that's so unrealistic. Does it make sense to think about changing that start date no later than January 1st? Something that's in keeping with, because when we started it felt, we immediately felt the pressure of, oh my gosh, we've got to be done by May 31st with a full report. And, just to remove that feeling of cramming out of it. I don't know.
I like that thought, but then my next thought is how early would it have to be?
Yeah. I mean, realistically, yeah, and because it's a commitment of, time and staff time to support it as well. But if you have more time, then I would think you can really do some meaningful work and get meaningful input and give you time for the commissioners time to really delve into it and debate certain items or that are brought up, recommendations maybe for amendments, and for the public to consume the information that comes forward. Because I'm only now actually getting an opportunity to really get into the charter and what it means, and just thinking about what it means to the average person every day, and especially those sections where it's not charter material, but it's in there. I'm just doing a brain dump,
Mhm.
thinking out loud. So to answer that question, I don't know if 6 months before it's due is something that's realistic. So that means you'd have to do the year before. So does that. November? Yeah, November.
Yeah, November. Or would that be?
No later than
No, that'd be December 1st.
December 1st. Okay. So all of December. And that's kind of crazy because it's a crazy month. It's almost like a shutdown month. No one's really productive in December, to be honest.
Mhm. Well, and if I'm reading A and B correctly, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Hillary, this commission was actually established under B, correct? Because we were not in the first odd numbered year of the decade. That would have been 2021.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it didn't really get established. It's sort of like what we talked about before. Even if you put in it, the charter that something must be done, even by a date certain, there's no real penalty when it doesn't. So, yeah, technically, is it the standard one? Is it the interim one? It's kind of hard to say. So, and the first commission, I mean, C, it was really supposed to be under C, and that definitely didn't happen. So,
Oh,
right, I mean, but that was in the middle of the pandemic, and so I think that that's probably why that didn't occur. But again, yeah, I mean, it might be something worth revising to make it, more clear, or if you feel like this structure doesn't really work, or make it more explicit that any, if it's not the general one in A, then it is by default the interim one. I mean, if that matters.
yeah. Would it matter though legally?
No, it's not going to matter legally. I mean, at the end of the day, the Charter Review Commission is sort of the citizens putting in the time and effort, like you all are, to make your recommendations. But then they proceed to the city council, where they go through the whole legislative process, and then after that, they go on the ballot. So it wouldn't really matter when the commission was created, but certainly I know there's been discussion about how short an amount of time it is to get the work done.
Mm-hmm. Because really it's that date that's more important, right? The end date, when you get the product to them so they can do their things to get it, whether or not it goes on the ballot, get ballots printed, et cetera, et
Right.
cetera.
Right. And obviously, the ballot happens only when there's a local election. So some years there won't be. And so then the proposed amendment would just wait until the next time there was an election. And that happens when the council passes their own charter amendments as well. If they pass it in a year where there is no upcoming election, then it just waits for the next ballot. But I think people were frustrated that, let me see, where was it? Let's see. I guess, now where is it? The whole, yeah, I mean, it's only 1 year. It's sort of the 2A, it shall complete its duties, submit its work no later than May 31st in the year following its establishment. So since this one was established in 23, it gives you till May 31st of 24. Some people have certainly said maybe in the year following its establishment is too short.
But then that also makes me wonder, if you give a longer time, does that just mean delay in doing the work? Everyone benefits from having a firm deadline, usually.
I think
functionally, if this was constituted to the letter of what's in the charter, use the example of, 2031 would be the next time there'd be that would be the first odd number year of a new decade. So you'd have a charter review commission that is constituted sometime in 2031, and there would not be another municipal election until a municipal general election until November of 2022. So you would have, theoretically, well over, almost a full, calendar year and a half to do the work of that commission. We're on a more truncated timetable just because of, the reality of, when we were all appointed and able to meet and start our work. But I think as designed, it allows for a reasonably, a process that has time for deliberation, but is not too leisurely and doesn't drag on in ways that are unproductive.
Before this was updated in I guess in 2020, there were less commissioners, correct?
Actually, there was no mandated commission process. It was like we'd had some ad hoc. I think one had been in the 1990s, and that was just convened as any other sort of advisory body. They took, I think, several years to do the work, and then they proposed it to the city council. So there wasn't really any set requirement that there be a review every 10 years. So there was nothing in there. I mean, they had reviewed kind of ad hoc when they wanted to, but there wasn't anything in the charter that mandated that they review. And of course, on the flip side, as you all know, there's nothing that requires the charter only be amended through this process. I mean, there's charter amendments on the ballots, at this point, frequently, and they don't go through your charter commission. So it's kind of, this, I think, was designed to at least get an overall review every 10 years.
Would it potentially be helpful if I gave a little bit of, just for background for folks, at the time that this charter amendment was adopted by the mayor and council, I was working in then Mayor Young's office as a liaison to the city council, so I can give some background kind of on how this specific iteration of a charter review commission came to be, if anybody thinks that would be helpful.
I do. I would love that, Matt.
Yeah, please.
Okay. Yeah. So, as folks may remember, in the wake of former Mayor Pugh leaving office, Council President Young became the mayor. Councilman Scott became the council president. And Council President Scott did a fairly thorough reorganization of the council and its committees. There were a greater number of committees and changing around some of the subject matter. And one of the committees that was created in that process was, I believe the name of the committee was the Equity and Structure Committee. And that committee had a really large and far-reaching number of different and sometimes contradictory charter amendments that they were considering. And basically that committee, just based on the timeline from when they were established, the fact that they were doing their work in the midst of a contested municipal election that eventually, we had some of the early impacts of COVID at the end of the term. Sort of the biggest thing to come out of that committee, a lot of the individual charter changes were kind of put on the shelf. And the idea was to have some mechanism in the city charter for there to be not necessarily the only opportunity, but at least a regular review and revision of the city charter. and that is where the legislation that became our commission came from. How it came to be, structured in the particular way it is with the appointees that are present, and then as Hillary already stated, kind of with the with new folks taking over new roles at some of the constitutional offices at City Hall, and the continuing impacts of the pandemic. We're obviously meeting much later than was intended for that initial review process, but the background of it was that there was a lot of, as we're still seeing now, a lot of energy on the city council to consider all sorts of different charter changes, and a desire to kind of have a more deliberative process that was regularly occurring and outside of that kind of more overtly political council process.
Thank you, Matt. That was really helpful. So one thing I've wondered as we've moved through this process, and Roger, I see you joined. We are in Article 11 for the Charter Review Commission. Matt very thankfully just gave us a rundown of how this article came to be. One thought I've wondered is whether it would be helpful if there was more in this article about how the commission was to do its work, or the form of the final product. And my first thought is that perhaps that just depends on the people on the commission, that maybe in some decades the commission would have people on it that have a very strong opinion and path forward, versus other decades they could be more up in the air about what they need to do and how they need to approach it. So that was just one thought I had about this article. I don't know that thought is well enough processed to make into a proposal, but I would like to hear what you guys think about that general idea.
Personally, I think that the point that you make about there being kind of different needs at different times really speaks to kind of keeping it as is and keeping it a little bit vague, that there's a mechanism for a regular review of the city charter, but the specific form that's going to take is going to be dependent on what the need is at that time. And I think, in a charter document, I think it's probably generally best to be, less prescriptive, because you can always kind of add that detail through legislation or regulation.
Is that maybe something that this commission should think about doing, like an exit document to pass forward to the next iteration of the commission of, hey, here are some things we found helpful. Here are some things we found sticky. Thoughts for you on your journey. Here you go.
I mean, I think that could be helpful to the next group, but again, to your point, there may be folks who have a particular thought process and have in their minds, how they want to approach review of the document, and then there are others who may find it extremely useful because maybe just the lack of familiarity with the process, just period. Because when we had Victor and some other people, he brought with him not just his understanding of the city, but having been on previous commissions. So I just think going forward, there'll be a lot of review commissions that are kind of finding their way. And by the time you hit a groove, it's time to give the report and dissolve. So. But the short answer is, I think I always believe in kindness and doing the other group a solid. You know, take it if you want to, but at least it's here.
Yeah. I guess our lovely city staff did provide us with like the guide for charter commissions from the National Civic League and other documents that are helpful. So like you said, Kathy, maybe it's a little, you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. And yes, Roger, we are on Article 11. We went over Article 10 earlier, Roger. Did you, and that's the Office of the Inspector General, did you have anything that you wanted to throw out there for the Office of the Inspector General? I can see you're thinking something. Are you able to unmute? Trying, okay. Yay.
Sorry about that. Yay, I can do things now. Yeah, I've had a total tech failure this evening, but I made it, so apologies. No, not at this time. I will see. I didn't see anything that I felt like needed to be put on the table, so thank you. And thanks for catching me up. I apologize for being late.
No worries, no worries. If anything, you missed a great part because Office of Inspector General is new. It's clean, like who wants to touch that?
We need it, yeah. But so no one found anything that was of interest to change or add?
So Hillary gave us some good information on the types of reviews they do and whether or not there really is an enforcement mechanism for the outcome of their reviews, but we didn't have any recommendations or suggestions. It was just questions to Hillary.
Okay, great. Thank you. And thanks, Hillary.
I have a quick question about the final report that staff included. That they had a lot of what I found useful is seeing the red line version that detailed substantive changes and technical. Are we going to have the same type of document that helps to differentiate between substantive and just technical as well for our recommendations? Is that the standard? That's what I'm wondering. Or was that just the kindness of the previous group?
You're talking about the report that's in tab 10?
Yeah.
The 2018 report?
Yes.
Well, I think the short answer is it depends on how many proposals are voted out of each committee and then what the commission as a whole accepts. The 2018 commission had a lot of proposals. I think it was in the first meeting, Vic said something about like they went big.
Yeah.
So if we do have a lot of proposals, I think doing a report like this where you can see the striking out, the redlining, the explanations right there within the language, I would love to do our report that way as well. But at this point, I don't know how to answer without knowing what's coming out of each committee yet.
Fair enough.
Well, and if there's nothing else from anyone on Article 11, the Charter Review Commission, the next thing on our agenda was actually to circle back to the pending proposals that this committee so far has discussed. And I went through Vic's wonderful notes, and by my count, we have 4, and y'all can correct me if I'm wrong. So we have one from Commissioner Ellis regarding the right to petition laws for referenda before they become effective. And the last note I saw in there was that Vic had asked the law department to review that one. There was Council Bill 24-0473 regarding the redistricting. There was also Commissioner Willis and Commissioner Lee's redistricting proposal regarding having an independent commission for redistricting. So I'm calling those separate since they're very distinct. And my note, or Vic's notes, show that the Department of Legislative Reference was asked to draft some language for the Willis and Lee proposal. And then the fourth one I have was from Commissioner Hartley himself regarding the council president being elected by the council rather than in the general election. Do any of you have in your notes one that I missed there? I went through Vic's notes twice. I went through my memory, which is always great. And those were the 4 that I pulled out.
Yeah, that sounded accurate to me, that I recall at least.
Okay. Thank you,
Thanks.
Roger. So I'm not really sure what order we want to look at these in, or, I mean, you're here, Roger. I don't know if you want to talk about yours more. Let's see. The only person we're missing from our committee is Davon. So if I'm counting correctly, excuse me, we do have enough people here that if there was a motion on one of these, we could take a proper vote. Because we have 5 out of 6 committee members.
Can I make a request?
Yes, Matt.
You know, and obviously the majority of the committee is going to do what we see best, but I would move. And this is maybe just me. I unfortunately I was stuck at work prior to this meeting. I don't have I remember our discussions, but I don't have the materials in front of me.
Mm-hmm.
I personally wouldn't necessarily feel comfortable taking a formal vote on any of these, but I do think some of them do merit some additional discussion. I also think I know we're going to hear as a whole commission from the comptroller and council president about some of their ideas on the charter, and I think it might be helpful to have that discussion before we take any formal positions on some of these. So if it would be okay with the rest of the committee, I would say maybe we could hold off and do formal voting on kind of everything before us at a future meeting, and maybe reserve tonight for additional discussion.
That's absolutely fine by me, unless somebody else on the committee has very strong opinions otherwise.
No, Matt, I think that's a really good idea too, Julianne, for a lot of reasons. I think, a lot of us, including me, probably put forward an idea, and, there was some really quick initial discussion and maybe not additional, staff recommendations or additional research done at that time. Like for Willis's proposal, for instance, I think he's dug in on that now. And so having a little bit more discussion before we report out as this is a recommendation to the full committee. Like I would be totally fine if everyone thought mine was, that's a really cool wonky idea there, Hartley, but I don't think we should do that this year. I'm not going to be offended at all. And I would rather have that conversation now than have it before the full commission, So I'm just being honest. That's my thought.
No, I appreciate that. I brought up the voting. Oh, sorry, Hillary, go ahead.
when you're done, I just wanted to make the committee aware of an additional proposal, but
Okay.
I didn't mean to interrupt.
Oh, no, I was just gonna say, so we're gonna hear from the comptroller and the council president on Thursday. And then our next committee meeting, which hopefully you all saw in the schedule from Ben, is next Tuesday, the 5th. And I know that's back-to-back Tuesdays, but I did that on purpose to give us a little flexibility before the next full commission meeting on the 14th. So we do have the meeting next week where we can do more discussion and then have the formal vote there. And what I can do in advance of that meeting is put the pending proposals in as thought out or unthought out of a status that they are, Roger, and lay them all out where they're sitting. If the law department has been asked to review them, or Department of Legislative References has been asked to draft language, put it all together so that everybody can have it to look at over the weekend, and then to combine with what we hear on Thursday. And next Tuesday, we can discuss them more. And if at that point we're ready, we can vote about them. I don't mean to imply we have to vote on anything before we're ready, because we still have time, even if we aren't ready after the 5th. We still have another committee meeting where we can vote things out. So if we're ready on one or two of them on the 5th, we can do it then. But if we need more time on the other ones, we can wait till the next committee meeting. It's just the sooner we get them out, the sooner the whole body has things to consider. But there are still other articles that the full body has to consider. So there's still work to be done. All right, Hillary, what was the other one you were going to bring up?
I hate to do this to everyone, but we just got word today that the State Board of Elections has certified a write-on petition that also has to deal with redistricting. And basically, my understanding is it makes an amendment to Article 3 of the Charter to reduce the council districts from 14 down to 8, and then provides that when a redistricting, when the number of council districts is modified, the mayor prepares a plan for redistricting based on the most recent census, and the mayor presents the plan to the council not later than the first day of February following the charter amendment approval. So keep that in mind, that looks like it will be on the next upcoming ballot. So this, just probably to preempt a few of these questions, if two conflicting amendments end up on the ballot, then as much of both of them that can be saved without sort of conflicting or crossing each other out, for lack of a better term, that's what's done. And then if things are absolutely conflicting, then they cancel each other out, and the language of neither of them is left in the charter. So unfortunately, I have to at least make you aware of that change of events.
I don't think I understand. Oh, go ahead, Roger.
Interesting. Matt, you go ahead. You were first to be interested.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just had I guess a clarification question. So it would reduce the number of single member council districts to 8. There would still be, would or would there not still be a president elected at large?
It looks like it did not touch that at all.
Okay,
everything else remains unchanged. All that it is council shall consist of 8 instead of 14 members in addition to the president.
Yeah.
And there shall be 8 districts with 1 member elected from each. And then the bulk of the change from, is then language added to say that if the number of council districts is ever modified by a charter amendment, such as, the one they're doing, then the mayor prepares a new redistricting plan and presents it not later than the first day of February of the first municipal election year following the charter amendment. That makes
So
sense. So
So it's only if they change
Yeah.
the number of districts, not just if population shifts?
well, that they leave in all the stuff for population and the normal 10-year redistricting. They just say that essentially if you change the number of districts, then you have to redistrict again. And the process
So
that is, yeah,
so the
maybe
redistricting process is the same. It's just when you have to do it, depending on if the number of districts changes. And
yeah.
yes, is that okay?
Can
All right,
everyone see that?
Yeah.
That is
Yeah,
a huge
I'm gonna be-
measure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to be honest. My initial concern was that, they're going to put an even number of people on the council. So that's why I wanted to make sure there was still an at-large member.
Yes. So it looks like it's 8 in addition to the president. So they'd be back to 9. I mean, I'm sure you're all aware they've had different numbers of council people over the years, and way back in the history there was 2 chambers of the city council. So I mean, there's nothing that forces you to have a certain number of people, or you can change that in your charter. So, but it looks like this will be on the ballot in the fall.
But so Hillary, I was listening to you and it sounded like, again, I'm just going to be kind of open and pretend like I don't care, and I really do about this. But you made it sound like, if I understood you, that this commission could effectively scuttle this proposal with one that is conflicting. I'm not saying you're recommending that, but an answer to that question.
Right. Essentially,
Okay.
the goal for anyone would be to save as much of all of them that pass. And again, we have to be clear, just because it's on the ballot in the fall doesn't mean that it would pass. So people could vote against it, and if it doesn't pass, it doesn't pass. But typically that doesn't happen, and usually people who don't know what to do don't vote. And so usually most of these, once they get on the ballot, they pass. And so then the question becomes, if there's a different measure, if the city council were to take up a measure either on its own or one recommended by this commission, and that made it through the process and also ended up on the ballot, and both were adopted, a court would always look to save as much of both as possible. So if one were looking to negate this, one would want to basically enact something that does the opposite, such that nothing could be saved in either of them. Does that answer your question?
In that case, we stay with what we have? What's the outcome, though, if nothing can be saved?
Neither is adopted. If you let's say, for example, and I'm making this up, that this goes on the ballot as it appears that it will. They've certified they have the 10,000 signatures. And then the council decides to take up, say, one of the other recommended paths forward from your commission about redistricting. If that negated some of this redistricting language in the big bold language on the top right, that might change. But if, for example, you and the council don't propose any part of an amendment that talks about the 14 districts, you could end up with a world in which they change that part's left in. The 8, the 14 down to 8 is left in. But maybe some of the language on redistricting cancels itself out.
Yeah. So, but the other side of this is this commission or council could put forward a rival proposal that restores it or basically keeps it the same or changes it to more, even, or whatever they decide to do, and that would then go up against this one.
Right. And so you wouldn't have the ability to just negate, how to say it. It would depend on what the competing proposal said, how much of the language. So, for example, a clear competing proposal would be changing the number of council districts. This says, 8 to 14 and a competing proposal says 14 to 20, if they both pass, then you're still at 14 because you can't have both 8 and 20. So that would be a clear conflict. It gets a lot harder if you're talking about this kind of redistricting language. You'd basically be looking at the concepts and how do you say that people adopted essentially two conflicting provisions. But if it's easy to see when it's numbers, but when it's just concepts like that, it's going to be a lot harder. But the court's always going to try to keep as much of both as possible.
Okay. I was asking, I'll just, be transparent. I'm definitely personally going to vote against this when it gets on the ballot. And I agree with you. The chances of it not passing are probably as little as 2%. I mean, maybe less than that. This will pass. So I was, just to be transparent, I was trying to think of if there was anything that this commission could do. And this is only me to make it difficult for this ballot initiative to make it. But it may not be our role, and it may not be the right thing, or it may not be something the commission would even want to do. So,
it does seem like, though, so take, for example, the Willis and Lee proposal regarding an independent commission for redistricting. So if this committee and then the full commission decided to put that forward as a proposal, and by somehow the council sends it forward, it would never actually happen, right? Because if both of these are on the ballot, doing an independent commission for redistricting will clash with that big chunky paragraph there, and so they will both fall out.
Well, that's a great question. I mean, it's clear you can't have 8 council members and 20 council members. What isn't necessarily clear is, would they say, well, the best way to reconcile this is to have an independent commission on the years that there is redistricting based solely on population, the 10-year redistricting. But if redistricting is done only because the number of council districts is modified, then that's when the mayor proposes. There's lots of different ways to. So, I think it's something obviously to consider as you're considering these other proposals. If your proposal could, would it actually conflict, and how? I'm probably not being as helpful as you want.
That's very helpful. So with this being certified, can they change it once it's certified?
No, I don't believe so. I believe this is what 10,000 people signed. So 10,000 people signed to put that on the ballot. So I'm sure it will go on the ballot. There may be other competing ones that the council passes, either from your recommendation and the Charter Review Commission, or of their own accord. And so, I think that if those all make it through the process, then you'd really have to look and see what they said and how much would be conflicting. Again, if the proposals we had, I thought, not we, but this commission had, were really thinking about redistricting every 10 years. I'm not sure any of them got, at least not at this point, into the weeds of how to redistrict if you change the number of council districts. So there is a world in which, though, you have a court could consider that a separate topic. But again, now knowing this, I wanted to make sure the commission knew this so that you have some sense going forward, and you're not operating in a vacuum.
So if this commission made a recommendation for reducing the size of council districts, thereby increasing the number of council districts, and then increasing the number of council members, let's say by 2. So instead of 14, make it 16. Then that would be a competing amendment?
Yeah, I mean, essentially, if you had something other than 8, I think a court would probably, if they both passed, then you'd be in that part. But again, like this one has not only changed the number of districts, but then the whole redistricting part based on the change. So you could end up with the numbers cancel each other out, and then the language in there that if in the future you ever change the numbers successfully, here's how you redistrict. So they could save part of this one, even if cancel out. So, again, it's kind of hard to see. I mean, it just highlights that, this charter commission is not the only way to change the charter.
Got it. There's something in the chat. What's that? Let me see.
Well, I think this will definitely merit, we invite all the commission to our committee meetings, but I will make sure that Commissioners Willis and Lee know about our committee meeting on the 5th in case they want to talk about their proposal more. Did anyone else have any other further thoughts on the write-on petition or the general 3 redistricting proposals floating out there before maybe we look at one of the 2 other proposals? Roger, is your hand up?
No, sorry I don't think it is.
I don't know. I just can't. I don't use this platform very often.
Same. Sorry, no worries.
Yeah. Well, while you're off mute, Roger, did you want to say anything tonight about your council president elected by the council? Or do you want to save that for a later night?
Well, yeah, I could at least try to provide a little bit of rationale as to why I threw it out there, and then perhaps also one reaction, that I received at the time, which I think is, fair to represent. The interest in this was that we have in our city, we have, of course, a very, very strong mayor system. In fact, one of the strongest mayor systems of the systems of government that exist. There are other systems of government that exist, but what it also means is that the council, who represent districts and pieces of our city that are really important and have different views sometimes, has a very difficult ability to overcome mayoral power or to advance or simply advance initiatives. What a citywide elected council president does, however, is adds yet another layer of difficulty for a council representing individual districts to get those voices across and perhaps advanced initiatives. And the reason why is that you now have a single council president who is not elected among the membership, but is elected citywide. So essentially, I can imagine, but tell me if anyone knows better than I do as a former staffer or what have you. If you're a council member in Northeast or Northwest or West Baltimore, and you're trying to get an initiative passed, you need to get it through the council president and then through the mayor. Council president doesn't represent a particular district in the city and is really not one among equals. He or she is one among the entire city and perhaps beholden to the entire city. Again, that has strengths and weaknesses, but for it to me seems to be the case that makes it more and more difficult for a council to be able to get something done. If they can't get it past the president and then can't get it past the mayor both, it's beyond dead. So there are other city councils across the nation where they select their council president from among their membership, meaning that president is on the same, at least to some degree, is selected by their peers and can be somewhat on the same page as their peers, and perhaps is, kind of beholden to the council and not perhaps the wide voters of the entire city like the mayor is. And then adding to that, you have the power of this council president to sit on the Board of Estimates, which is a very powerful entity in our city with respect to allocating the budget and spending. May have that slightly different. So the idea of it is to restore a little bit more balance to the council and a little bit more opportunity for the council members to select their own member rather than have the city select their own members. And again, it's not uncommon across systems of government to do that. Now, when I did mention this, and honestly, my motives on this are really good government, and also perhaps having citizens in districts around the city have a little bit more voice in our government. There was one argument made against it, which is that this could disempower African American voters because the city is now majority Black. And that by this would essentially be taking away the ability for African American, majority of the city, African American voters to select a citywide elected office, which I respect. I really do that position. My counter to that was that the city is majority Black. The districts are, for the most part, majority Black, and that the council member who is selected as council president has a very strong likelihood of either being African American or representing the interest of that entire council, which are going to be predominantly citizens of the city who are predominantly African American. So that was my argument back. But it is certainly an argument to be made that if you're taking an election away from people, that feels like you're losing something in a democracy, right? And so, I wanted to be fair and represent that opinion because I think it's important to represent it. So I want to be honest about that. And there may be other reasons why this idea is not great either. It's a change. It's a big change. And right now there's a council president election. And of course, this proposal would not affect that even if it went onto the ballot and passed, because it would not impact this particular election. It would future, as I understand it. Correct, Hillary? And if I made any mistakes, I'll just put it that way, in what I just said, please feel free to correct me. I may have made a mistake in logic, or I may have made a mistake in how the council president functions with respect to the council members. So that's basically it. That's basically why I did it.
I'm sorry, but would the expectation be that the council member who's elected to be president then move from part-time to full-time type status? Like, how do you envision that? Because right now council members are technically part-time, right? So council president is not considered a part-time position. So I was just wondering, in your mind, how that would look.
I think the way it would probably look, but correct me if I'm wrong, anyone, is that if indeed the council president is full-time versus the council members being part-time, under the current charter, the person selected would end up being in the position of council president as it's written now. In other words, I think to change that, we would have to change the article or piece, a section that is that outlines, the job essentially of what a council president is. So I think we'd have to change two things if that would be separate. In other words, I think. And also, I think to the point that I made about Board of Estimates, the new president would still be on the Board of Estimates because there's a separate part of the charter that says the council president is a member of the Board of Estimates. So it doesn't change that either unless that were changed. But am I right about that? That's a really good question, and I hope I answered it correctly.
Yeah.
Do in some of the other counties where this, I mean, you're right that this isn't a totally unprecedented idea. I think in Baltimore, Anne Arundel, some of the other counties where they select a president from among the members, the person who fills that chair or president's role. I don't know exactly how it works in their personnel system, but there is, some kind of attendant, pay bump and other benefits that the person accrues as for their service in that office.
Thanks, I appreciate that. Yeah, and I was aware that some of our counties selected their own, and then certainly other major cities do too. But thank you, that really helped. So anyway, that was that. I think I would also say that I think, being a political scientist and having studied government and looked at government for a very long time, there's always something to be said, and it's very popular to have elections, but there's also a lot of reasons why we don't elect lots of positions directly from the citizens in our government too. We don't elect cabinet positions. We don't elect often, city administrators and county administrators and others. We sometimes allow certain positions to be selected by those elected leaders that we elect. And we allow them that because we place some great trust in them that they will pick really qualified people and that they may know more than I do as a voter about what is the best person to run the Department of Public Works, or in this case, among council members, the best person to lead them as they work with the mayor, or sometimes even joust with the mayor at times. So that, and I think that's probably some of the council members. I don't know how the council members feel about this directly. There are probably some that like it and some that hate it, if I brought this up. But I suspect that some of them would say that if they were agreeing with me, they might say something to the effect of that they have a hard time getting some of the positions that they would like, legislative proposals, either through or on the agenda, because they're not able to work with someone who is necessarily elected like they are. I don't know, or that they select for that matter as a majority. I may even be intruding in the middle of council member fights and I don't even know it. So I see he's smiling, so I probably am. But I'm a babe in the woods on this one in terms of not knowing the politics behind this.
So if we as the entire commission voted to move this amendment forward, the city council could always just say thanks, but no thanks. So it's no guarantee, right? Okay. But I like the argument. It is intriguing.
You can always blame it on that'll just be that. That was Roger's dumb idea.
I guess can I offer a brief counter argument?
Absolutely, go ahead, Matt.
It would be fun.
And Roger, I want to say, I mean, I really do appreciate the thought put into the proposal, and I do understand that this is something that's not totally unheard of. I think to the sort of the point about the kind of internal workings of the council and what items do and do not make the agenda. None of that stuff is set in the city charter. The way the council governs itself is set by the council rules, which are adopted by the council as a whole. And if you look at kind of the longer view history of the council, the specific roles and duties and powers of the council president have changed from time to time, depending on the composition and kind of the political affiliations of each individual iteration of the city council. So I would be really hesitant to support making a functional change to the way that the city works, based on what might be a problem that is, that the council already has its own tools to address and maybe, is not using them, or there's not sufficient support among the body to use them or to agree on how to use them. And the other thing I think that, we need to be aware of, one of the really important jobs of the council president, especially in recent city history, is to be on deck to, kind of at a moment's notice, step in and serve as the mayor. And obviously it's something we've seen happen several times very recently. And I'm sure that, it'll, hopefully not for a long while, but I'm sure it'll happen again. And having somebody who is the city council president, who has a broader view of the city electorate, that has had to go and run for that office in all corners of the city, that has to hear from constituents in all corners of the city, and that has, been had an opportunity to face the voters of the city as a whole, I think is really a strength of our system. That there's able to be some sort of functional.
Matt, you went on mute.
I think we might have lost you, Matt.
Sorry, no, I didn't go on mute. My car turned off on me.
Oh,
Can you hear me now? Yeah, sorry.
Sorry.
I think having somebody who's been kind of tested and has, through their role on the board of estimates, has a deep knowledge of how city government works, is a strength of our system. And I would, again, be, I think, pretty hesitant to entertain any changes to that.
Really appreciated. Both good arguments. No, thank you. I appreciate it.
Question for Matt or even Hillary. How often does the council review or make changes to the council rules? Can that be done at any time, or just at the beginning of a new, election cycle?
It can be done at any time. Yeah. In the 15 years I've been here, I've seen somebody do it once. That wasn't part of the general beginning of their session. So at the beginning of their 4-year session, they generally adopt the rules for their session, and they're pretty much verbatim the rules that the previous session had. I mean, there's usually no change, but they do the official adoption. Outside of that, I've seen a change once, and it was former Councilwoman Mary Pat Clark, and she changed how vacant seats were filled for not the council, obviously not the not council president up to mayor, but within their own body. If somebody left the body, or they retired, or, they moved, the whole body had to elect, say, a council president to replace the one that had just, been elevated to mayor under the charter, as Matt was talking about. That leaves, a vacant council seat for that district. So that was the rule change she put forward. But short of that, they haven't really made any rule changes that I'm aware of.
And that's just a simple process, right? Like that kind of modification doesn't just go through the council I mean,
Yeah.
is there an official process for it where they have to have certain time to review? Like, how does that work?
Yes, the council rules say how you can amend the council rules.
Okay.
So yeah, so there is general provisions on changing the rules. So Rule 1-4 talks about changing the rules. And so I can quickly bring that up on the screen because it's probably easier than me just, reading it. But that should be up there now. Hopefully you can see it and it's not too small, but it's Council Rule 1-4. So,
Okay.
yeah. So basically you have to propose it, submitted to the council, and they basically adopt it with a 2/3 vote.
Mhm.
And one of the changes that I had mentioned before was to subsection 4. If you're going to change the rule on vacancies, then you have to have a public hearing. So that was part of the rule that was changed on vacancies. So it kind of gets redundant, but essentially, yes, this is the current process they have for changing their own rules.
Okay, that's clear. Thank you.
Pretty similar to a process for like if you want to change a bylaws or something like that. Protect the minority voters. Roger, I had one question about your proposal, and apologies if you said this and I just missed it. Would it mean that the council would vote for the president on a yearly basis, or would they be voted president for a term, the whole term?
I did not go that far. I'll be honest with you, and I had not thought that through. I was assuming though that it would be for the normal term, but that I haven't written this down and I didn't put in language of any sort that said this would be a year-to-year thing. I'm imagining though that I would support one that would be the full term of the council members that are there, because you would want some continuity and some ability for the leadership to function and to do the work on the Board of Estimates and really to have some time to make change. And a 1-year term would just be they'd be rotating it around, almost passing the gavel around, perhaps. Or maybe not. They may just select the same person 4 years in a row too. But yeah, I thank you for asking that because I had not specified that at all and hadn't thought about it. So, but I would be leaning towards the term.
Yeah, at my work, the gavel does pass yearly for chair, and it creates a lot of start, stop, can't
Churn.
really make it through anything. So do you know off the top of your head, Roger, Baltimore County, Montgomery County, are they for the full term or are they a shorter amount? Because they both
Sure,
elect.
but I could look.
No,
I could pull
it's
that
okay.
up.
I could look it up too. I just wasn't sure if
Yeah.
you knew off the top of your head.
I would bet for the very reasons we were both discussing that it's got to be a term of more than 1 year, because then it becomes a ceremonial, thing that you don almost, like you were just describing, and a lot of start, stop, and a lot of churn. But I don't know. I mean, I could be surprised. It could be
Well,
that
and
there's cities that
Julian
do that.
Jones was council president for so long in Baltimore County.
Yeah. Hey,
Oh,
sorry.
go ahead.
No, that's all right. I had to step away for a minute, but to answer your question, so in Baltimore County and Anne Arundel County, I'm not immediately familiar with Montgomery, but I know in Baltimore County and Anne Arundel, it is they do choose the chair or president yearly, and I think in Anne Arundel County there may actually
Interesting.
be a prohibition in their rules on it being the same person year to year.
Interesting.
I don't know if that's the practice or if it's in the actual council rules. In Baltimore County, obviously that's not the case. And as you noted, Julian Jones, I think, was the president for like 3 or 4 years, and it did recently just change. But he
I thought
had
he was
held.
president for longer than that.
He may. I think he's been president more than one time, but most recently, I think for the last 3 or 4 years.
Mhm.
It's been a while.
Thanks for that. I'm surprised, but I can also see what the logic might be for that.
Yeah, and again, Anne Arundel County, that may just be their, like traditional practice. I can't,
Uh-huh.
I couldn't say for certain that it's written in the rules, but I know they do change over significantly more frequently.
Yeah. Thank you.
It seems like it would be a paperwork nightmare with the staff having to switch all the letterhead and everything.
Well, I don't know if anybody has been following any of the news with the Anne Arundel County Council, but they've had a whole bunch of issues recently with resolutions and rescinding resolutions, dealing with how how staff is supervised. And part of that may be attributable to how frequently they overturned that chair's position.
I'm gonna have to look that up.
Yeah, that's
they had decided that the council they had like 3 kind of senior staff level administrator positions in the office, and they had decided that those positions were not supervised by the chair of the council, but by every member of the council individually and collectively. So instead of 1 supervisor, they now had 7. And then they very quickly rescinded that because they were having problems recruiting new staff to take those now vacant positions.
Well, as somebody who has 6 bosses, I actually find that surprising, but I guess it depends on your group of people. Let's see. If the little person next to me gets to be too loud, please give me a wave and I'll get him to turn his device down lower. So the only proposal that we haven't discussed so far was Commissioner Ellis's proposal about the right to petition laws for referenda before they become effective. I don't know if does anyone want to say anything about that one tonight? I can reach out to him. I mean, I'm going to reach out to him anyways about the redistricting proposal, but I can reach out to him and ask him if he's available to come to our next meeting if he wants to talk about it more or to make a formal proposal. I'm going to pause for an awkwardly long time just to make sure. Okay, well, I'm not hearing anything.
I do have a redistricting question, but not about the Willis proposal. I forget, did we ever get around to having a more in-depth discussion about Councilman Cohen's? I think we had brought it up around the same time that we talked about John Willis's, but because it hadn't, the text of it was not actually available and it hadn't been introduced in the council. Did we ever circle back around to that? Am I just forgetting about it?
So if I'm remembering correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, Roger, Kathy, Emily, we didn't, and I don't remember at what point you came in, Matt. At our meeting on March 5th, I'm forgetting the number now. Yeah, March 5th. If we can have the language of that bill, I think it's been put out, the actual language.
It's since been introduced. I know when we were having the conversation initially, it hadn't been, and Victor had recommended that we maybe save it for another time.
Right. So I think we should bring that up next Tuesday at our next committee meeting. We can dive into that if Commissioners Willis and Lee are able to be there for their proposal, and then we can circulate the language Hillary had on her screen earlier of the write-on petition, so that way we can have all 3 of them side by side, discuss them, and
I'm sorry, all 4, because we also have the council president's redistricting proposal, which I know we did. I know that we did talk about briefly, but I'm sure that we will talk about again when the president addresses the full commission.
So his is not the same as Council Bill 24-0473, right?
I'm not certain. I don't have the bill number in front of me, but
I'm
there
hoping
was
Hillary will.
there was a proposal from Councilman Cohen and one from the council president, and I don't know if there were any more from the council members, but those are the two I remember.
So the notes from the last time 24-0473 came up says that Aaron, whose last name is really scary,
DeGraffenreich.
DeGraffenreich.
DeGraffenreich. That
And if Aaron walked through it, then yeah, that would be the president's proposal.
okay. He
He
explained
gave
the
us-
general
yeah, he gave us
intent and its provisions.
Yep.
Okay. So did
Yeah,
I count wrong? Is there a council proposal in addition to the president's proposal?
Yes, I'm looking online and I'm seeing more than one, just listed online right now.
Okay.
Hillary, is it, when you say more than one, is it more than two? Because I know there's the one from Councilman Cohen, and I think he had some co-sponsors, and then the one from President Mosby and his co-sponsors. Are there any additional ones besides those two?
Well, it's interesting. I'm seeing 240473, which I believe is the one for the let's see. That's the council president's one. That was the one you were discussing earlier. And then I'm seeing here, I'll just share my screen really quickly. So I've just brought up the web page that has this, and I typed in the word redistricting. So what I'm seeing is two charter amendments, 240473, and I believe that's the council president one. And then I'm seeing 240487, which is another charter amendment about redistricting. And then I'm seeing an ordinance, not a charter amendment. So I'm not exactly sure what that one is. So I'm seeing 240473, 240487, and 240492.
Everybody has ideas.
Hey, Julianne, I just got word if you are able or somebody is able to elevate. I think in the attendees there's BOE WebEx, and that is that actually is Aaron DeGraffenreich. So if he can be elevated, he might be able to.
Oh wow! I didn't know I could do that. First time on this platform.
All right, let me see if, and I don't know if I can.
I just did it for him.
Oh, good, perfect. Hey, Aaron.
Right, sorry, I've been sitting here listening for the meeting. But yes, I don't have, I'm looking for the numbers myself, but I think the only two redistricting charter amendments that are currently pending in the council are the one from Council President Mosby and one from Councilman Costello. You said this one is listed as an ordinance?
Yeah. Do you know what that is? An ordinance about a redistricting commission? 240492.
That would be Councilman Cohen's, but I thought that he had intended that to be a charter amendment.
Yeah, I'm seeing two charter amendments and one ordinance. So, but this just highlights the fact that, you know, they can come from anywhere.
Right. So I think,
I mean, not anywhere, but you know, there's going to be multiple redistricting type language that you're probably going to want to review.
Feeling like there's so much there that we may want to make that the bulk, if not all of our agenda for the next committee meeting. how does that sound to other members of the committee if we circulate the language? Hillary, we can pull it from these files, right? The language. I don't go
Yeah,
on to the City
absolutely.
of Baltimore Registrar very often, so apologies.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. So I could either send around a link with all of these so everybody can just link to it, or I can attach PDFs. And I will pull out of my emails. I want to say Vic sent around something either from Commissioner Willis or Commissioner Lee with their base idea. So we can have all of those side by side to compare at the next meeting, discuss, see where everybody's thoughts are and go from there. Does anybody else have any thoughts on that? I'm not hearing anybody. Does that just mean y'all are stuck on mute, or that I gave Aaron too much power and he forced muted on you?
We have the utmost confidence in your leadership.
Thank you. Thank you, Kathy. Matt, did you have something?
I was just gonna recommend. I think it would be great if you could send around something, but would ask if it would be possible for everybody to maybe do a little bit of homework before we get to our next meeting, so that we don't end up spending the bulk of the meeting, because I don't want to diminish the importance of the redistricting process, but there's it's something that happens every 10 years, or I guess possibly more, but compared to some of the other things that we ought to potentially be taking a look at, want to make sure we have enough time and space for those discussions as well.
Yeah, no, Matt, that's a great point, because I know I haven't looked at all of these enough to keep straight in my head the distinction between the council president's proposal, Councilman Costello's proposal versus Commissioner Willis's, and now this new one Hillary brought up tonight. So agreed. I will try to get an email around to everyone expeditiously, so that you have time to look at those. But also remember, some of these have been in your email before. So if you have time before I get my email out, just go back to Vic's prior email. And I think Commissioner Lee, sent around an email to everyone too with some of this in there. So I will try to consolidate that for everybody, but as much as we can do our homework and be prepared for that discussion. Because the other two I have on my list, which I know I'm repeating, but I'd rather repeat than miss something off my list. So we have all of these for the council redistricting. We have Commissioner Ellis's on the right to petition laws for referenda before effect, and then Commissioner Hartley's, which we discussed earlier about the council president. Committee members can feel free at the next meeting to bring up other proposals as you wish. And other members of the commission could as well. But as far as our list right now, that's all we have on it. All right. Kathy, you came off mute, so I'm immediately going to see if you want to say something.
Oh, no, I just wanted to be prepared in case you asked questions. I didn't want you to think I fell asleep or something and my eyes are just open.
I appreciate that. So that was everything I had on my list for tonight. I don't see any other people on that would want to give public comments. Now that the BOE WebEx/Aaron has been elevated, I don't see any other attendees. Michael Wells, we established earlier, was the Charm TV person doing the recording, so I'm not going to ask him if he's here for public comment. Hillary, you're more used to WebEx. Am I looking correctly? I see.
Yep, that's my understanding. There's no other attendees.
Okay. So no public comments. Before we close for the night, were there any other committee comments, thoughts, questions, requests? Hoorahs.
I did want to just thank, well, you, of course, but Roger and Matt for the perspectives on the recommendation or what you put forward on the council president position. It was very, it was interesting to hear both sides. So I appreciate that. So thank you guys.
Agreed.
And one thing to note, I'm sorry, that if you say Aaron DeGraffin Wright's name enough, it will not be difficult to say it 10 times in a row.
And if you look at it while you say it, it really does track DeGraffin Wright.
Yeah.
But my head wants to add more syllables.
It's all right.
And I
It's a
told
cheat
Ben
sheet myself
Gethorn
to
this
get it
morning,
right.
my mom was born an Eisentrager.
Oh.
I was born in Durham, and I voluntarily took on Montes de Oca. So you'd think, but I think that's part of it. I want to get it right so badly that I worry about messing it up. So, thank you, Kathy.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, I will see as many of you as possible on Thursday for the comptroller and my brain just went blank. It's the comptroller and the council president, right?
That's right. Yes.
Presenting on Thursday. Thank you, Aaron DeGraffin, right? And then next Tuesday again here for our committee, and we'll keep chugging along, and we will do ourselves proud. All right. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great one.
The little guy says bye.